From the New Arts and Media Studios in Milwaukee, I'm Charles Purcell. This is The Log. Back together with you to talk about our thoughts on current events. Hey, a quick reminder. You know how we do things around here. The podcast drops on Monday mornings and Thursday mornings. The Thursday morning podcast is recorded Wednesday afternoon and then edited and then posted. The Monday episode is recorded sometime over the weekend. And I say that just to remind you, don't come to me for late-breaking news. I'm not the guy for that. It was really illustrated these last few weeks. I recorded the Monday podcast before I saw the Sunday debacle of that Kirk memorial. And the previous two Thursday episodes caught me because the Kirk shooting happened Wednesday while I was already recording and editing. Then the following Wednesday was the Kimmel suspension, which happened while I was recording. So don't come to me for late-breaking news. The advantage of that, of course, is I've got a day or two to simmer, to deliberate, to add some thought and nuance to whatever I'm commenting on. You know, it's nice to... And it's exciting to get breaking news. But boy, the so-called hot takes from everybody who just have to comment immediately, I don't know. More harm than good, I think, maybe. I used to have fights. I had lots of fights in the halls of public radio when I worked for them. I worked for Wisconsin Public Radio, as you know, for several years. And we had lots of fights. That was one of the things I fought with my bosses and coworkers about. I would say, why do we have to just jump on these stories immediately? For the reasons I just alluded to. We lack nuance. We lack thoughtfulness. There's no reason we should have to jump on a story the minute it happens. And I'm talking now, I'm not talking about the news itself. Of course, you report news right away. Of course. That's not a question. I'm talking about the talking heads. I produced a daily 3 hours of news analysis, booking guests and talking, the whole talking head thing. For those programs, you don't have to jump on the big story. But, of course, you do. And, of course, there's only one reason, and we all know what that one reason is that's money, that's clicks, that's viewers, that's listeners. And even at public radio, they felt compelled. They just had to do it. I said, man, take a breath, will you? No, I lost that fight. I lost all my fights at public radio. I didn't win any of them. I went to several of the conferences, the public media conferences in D.C., and I asked the same question there. I had a chance to, in these big ballrooms, and there's a speaker, and then there are a couple of mics set up for questions afterwards, and you stand in line. And I stood in line and waited my turn, and I finally got my turn. I asked that very question. I said, don't you think it would be better if those of us who are the talking heads, providing the analysis and the opinion, if we took a breath, if we waited a day or two? You could hear, they literally booed me. I mean, you could hear it in the room. No. We love when there's late breaking news. We love when there's that one big story that everybody's talking about. So little old Don Quixote me continues. I don't know. Okay. So, well, speaking of which, just now before I sat down to record, got the news about the shooting in Dallas at the ICE detention, at the processing. See, there again, I want to get my facts right. It's an ICE facility. It's not a detention center. I'm not even sure it's got to be some sort of a processing center because there were kidnap victims there, or as they call them, detainees. And that's how a few of them got shot. Again, you're going to know a lot more about this than I know right now. So we'll comment on that if and when it's necessary. In the meantime, you know what's going on. The only thing I know so far is the alleged shooter has been identified. There was, somebody scrawled anti-ICE on one of the casings. That's a thing now. You got to label your casings, your shell casings, bullet casings. And we know nothing about the alleged shooter except that he's a young white guy. Wow, there's a surprise. And that he's been shooting guns since he was a kid. He comes from a gun family. Gee, there's a surprise. So that much we know. All right. I've got no big announcements as far as events coming up, except I want you to keep your calendar free October 5th, Sunday, October 5th, non-cooperation training. I want you to check with your people. And it looks like a lot of groups are participating in this. Unions, Indivisible. I'm looking right now at a post specific to the San Francisco Bay Area. But look in your area, see what's going on. Sunday, October 5th. The No Kings movement, their next big invitation is for October 18th. Mark your calendars there. I want to fill the streets of America and the world. ThePeoplesUSA.com, they're the ones leading the boycotts. I mentioned Indivisible, lots of organizations out there. Okay, in no particular order, I'm going to give my thoughts on a couple things. Well, okay, Jimmy Kimmel is back, of course. Again, plenty of resources there. Go watch the monologue if you missed it. It was fantastic. I do want to clear up a couple things that literally everybody is getting wrong. The Orange Menace's threats to take away the licenses of networks. Networks don't have licenses. And it seems like everybody, from comedians to journalists to the talking heads, everybody is naively, ignorantly repeating the lie. They make it the premise of their question. Well, do you think that he has the right to take away the licenses of networks? Or what do you think about networks having their licenses challenged? Hey, network national level journalists, you don't know that networks don't have licenses. Individual stations have licenses. God, it's just infuriating, these people. And we've heard about these big conglomerates, especially Sinclair and Nexstar. These are two companies that own many, many stations. Nexstar owns over 200 individual stations. Sinclair is next with 185. There's one called Tegna, which Nexstar is trying to buy up, which is why they need favors from the FCC. Not only approval of the merger or the buyout, but they have to actually change the rules in order to allow Nexstar to make this purchase. Because one owner can only have so many individual stations. So they need FCC to change the regulations. Anyway, I just want to make sure everybody knows the basic fact that nobody else seems to understand. Only individual stations have licenses. So even Nexstar, with their 200, or if the deal goes through, 265, each one of those 265 stations has its own separate license. And for the FCC to crack down on anybody, they'd have to have individual action taken on each of those 265 stations. And it's time consuming and it's paperwork and you got to prove your charges and, it has to go through a hearing. It's, So no, the FCC is not just going to take away the license of a major network and it's all crazy. Not to say that the regime isn't having success with the media. Of course they are. They've defunded PBS. They've defunded NPR. They got pretty much all the major networks running scared, except for this, latest little victory for Jimmy Kimmel and ABC. Yes, that's very good. But the larger picture is they're still kowtowing 9 ways out of 10. You can pretty much give up, for the most part, with, a couple of rare exceptions. You just give up on ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, MSNBC. It's over. It's just over. They're done for. And now you've heard the Department of Defense has ordered journalists working in the Pentagon that they are no longer allowed to file stories without prior authorization from the department. How's that? How's that for fascism? So I'm not saying we give up on this. Of course we have to fight for free media. I'm just telling you, while we do that, you have to understand who you're watching, who you're listening to. Avoid them altogether, as I said, with rare exceptions. Go ahead and watch Kimmel on ABC. You have my blessing. But any kind of actual news, any kind of talking head analysis, just don't even bother. And if you do, you got to go in with your eyes open. And now, of course, they've just gone into kind of a warp speed after the Kirk shooting. They're going after everybody. All so-called left-wing organizations. Socialists, Code Pink, ACLU, Indivisible. Everybody. And the famous Martin Niemöller quote, the German preacher, was a Lutheran preacher, I forget. You know it, right? First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. So forgive me for repeating that much overused quotation, but it couldn't be more apropos. Fill in the blank with any number of groups. First they came for the immigrants, and I did not speak out because I was not an immigrant. Then they came for trans folks, and I'm not trans, so I didn't speak out. Then they came for lawyers, and I did not speak out because I am not a lawyer. Then they came for professors. Then they came for comedians and journalists and librarians. They came for the poor. And again, I did not speak out because I'm not poor. Then they came for the homeless, and they, just name the group. So, yeah, speak out. Loudly. With your voice, with your money. We are just constantly around here hammering on and on about strikes and boycotts. Because their end game is basically China, Russia, North Korea. One party rule, no meaningful elections. State-approved media. The Defense Department literally is calling for state-approved media. They want to toss out the Bill of Rights. They want military in the streets, a police state, state-sponsored violence ruled by fear, where the great masses of people are poor, afraid, and powerless. That's the end game. So, okay, celebrate the win. Jimmy Kimmel over ABC and Disney. But man, you got to keep your foot on the gas. Everybody boycott everything. We have to demand that the corporations defy the regime. That all Americans, individuals, organizations, universities, law firms, private corporations must openly defy the regime, denounce the regime, ignore the so-called executive orders. Yeah, do not take your foot off the gas at this point. All right, let's talk just a little bit about this ridiculous autism announcement. You know what I was hoping for, and I posted about this. I was hoping that I could get a friend of a friend of a friend who knew somebody in the press corps, because I wanted that first question after they spread all of their ridiculous lies and drunk uncle stuff about autism. I wanted the first question from the reporters to be about Epstein, because I just wanted to see his head explode. Yeah, this ridiculous, you'd have to laugh if it wasn't so damn serious. The lies and the misinformation and the just complete, utter moronic take on autism. This is pure crazy uncle at Thanksgiving stuff. That's all it is. That's all the Orange Menace is. That's all RFK is. They're just 100% drunk uncle at this point. You got thousands of researchers around the world have studied autism for decades. There's a great body of knowledge based on reams of data. It grows by the day. I mean, what kind of monumentally moronic, delusional narcissist has the chutzpah to stand in front of the world and pontificate on issues of life and death that they have no idea about? It's no better than your buddy at the bar who does his own research. I mean, this is nuts. Something else I would love a reporter to have asked. Just a very simple question. Mr. President, what is autism? For those of us who don't understand what you're talking about, please define autism for us. You don't have to call him a moron, which I'm always advocating for. Everybody right to his face should call him exactly what he is and tell him he's full of it. But this is another little tactic here. What's your understanding of autism? Tell us exactly what it is. And then just let him flail so we can all see just very clearly that he has no idea what he's talking about. Anyway. So, I don't know. I don't have anything else to add. If you know about this story, if you've heard about it, just please know that they are entirely alone. This is 100% drunk uncle BS. Every expert in the world, every expert organization in the world says that they're full of it, that acetaminophen does not cause autism. They're pinning everything, I think, maybe on one study that noted there may be a correlation. But that means absolutely nothing. That's not causation. A correlation is people who drown in the ocean are all wearing bathing suits. So bathing suits must cause drowning. A ridiculous analogy, but it's basically what it is. One thing doesn't cause another. Well, speaking of ridiculous, embarrassing moments, the United Nations is welcoming world leaders this week. And the Orange Menace gave a long babbling rant out of his little anus mouth. More drunk uncle stuff. By the way, though, there was one piece of good news. Congratulations to our glorious Antifa escalator and teleprompter sabotage divisions. Excellent work there, comrades. Speaking of Antifa, there's a big Antifa meeting tonight. So don't forget, we're taking nominations for all leadership positions. So all chapters are having their big meeting tonight. Come on out. Also on the agenda, violence planning. Please check the updated spreadsheet to see if it's your turn to bring snacks. And don't forget, it's dues week. Big Antifa meetings tonight, all chapters. Let's go back. I want to give you a couple thoughts on the Kirk rally. If you didn't see it, congratulations. If you didn't see any clips, even bigger congratulations. There's no point in seeing any of this. But you do need to understand what happened. It was the single most garish, over-the-top, self-righteous, sanctimonious spectacle I've ever seen in my entire life. It was basically a Nuremberg rally. The whole fascist fetishism of martyrs, there's a long history of that. The aforementioned Stephen Miller gave the most frightening address of the event, calling you and me evil, saying they have to save the West. Decipher that one. Yeah, we're enemies. We're wicked. They have to finish the job. Does that take wild interpretation? They are on the side of good. You and I are the forces of darkness and evil. And Stephen Miller and his folks will achieve victory. Yeah. His was the most frightening, but he certainly wasn't alone. Marco Rubio, Pete Hegseth, J.D. Vance, all just overflowing with references to pure white Christian nationalism. Don Jr. went off on the, and Miller did this as well, on how we killed Charlie Kirk. And then J.D. Vance, from what I saw, got one of the larger, maybe the largest ovations of the night. They're ready for him. This is his launching pad. Vance said, quote, "They tried to silence Charlie Kirk. They." He's talking about you and me. He's talking about us. We killed Charlie Kirk. Vance used the word revival. This is a revival. Yeah, the Christian nationalism is very strong. Charlie Kirk taught us most of all that Jesus Christ was King of Kings. Charlie Kirk was a hero to the nation and a martyr to the Christian faith. Christian and nation are only 5 words apart. Hero to the nation and a martyr to the Christian faith. Yeah, the Christian nationalism, coupled with the Broligarch techno-fascists who bought and paid for, who created J.D. Vance. Yeah, they're ready. There's clear evidence here that the next guard is ready to assume the throne. They are good to go. And they are all on the same page. So, any of you taking delight in the physical demise of the Orange Menace, yeah, he's going to keel over one day. But these guys are ready, and we have to be ready. Yeah, I don't want to go back in the details, but, look for this. It's all over social media. There's a side-by-side comparison of the Charlie Kirk Memorial Speech by Stephen Miller, side-by-side with the so-called Storm is Coming address by Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda minister of the Nazis, 1932. So comparing Goebbels' The Storm is Coming speech to Miller's Kirk Memorial speech, side by side, find it. It's crazy. This is where we are. One last item here before I leave you for today. Kamala Harris is out on her book tour. You may have seen her already. You may see her coming up here. She's making the rounds. I got to say this about Kamala Harris. We haven't mentioned her name since the election. No need to, really. But she's out there again, and she's obviously flirting with the idea of running for president. The great little Office meme where Michael Scott is yelling, no, 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 no. Here's my thumbnail on Kamala Harris. She never had it, ever. Kamala Harris is a living manifestation of the Peter Principle. That's the idea that you fail upwards. You're good at your job as a loader on a dock. So you get promoted to chief loader, or whatever they call it. And then you get promoted again into the executive ladder of the corporation because you were a good dock worker. You get promoted from within. That's a good thing, right? Of course it is. But the Peter Principle tells us that you're promoted up to the position where you fail, and then you stay there. Yeah, you were a good worker down on the docks. You were strong, got along well with your coworkers, did everything right. But now you're behind this desk in this executive position. You don't know what the hell you're doing. You got promoted until you failed, and then there you stay. Well, that's Kamala Harris. By all indication, she was a really pretty good lawyer, really good prosecutor. So then she winds up being a district attorney of San Francisco, and then later the attorney general of California, where her flaws started really showing. Because you got to have some leadership. You got to really know what you're doing. You got to have some political chops. And that's where she started failing at that level. Oh, she flip-flopped. She was tough on crime, and then she wasn't. And then she was perceived as not being tough enough, so she tried to be tougher. And it all started falling apart. But she manages to get elected to the U.S. Senate. All right, good for her. And she got some attention because she was very good in the hearings with these tough questions for the witnesses. Well, she was a trained prosecutor. So yeah, she'd be good at that. That was the job she seemed to be pretty good at by all accounts. But she failed upwards and wound up being a very mediocre senator who got lots of attention because she was a good prosecutor and she would get viral clips in the hearings. And then she was an absolutely terrible presidential candidate. She had nothing to say. She had no real positions. She had no fundamental core values that she could enunciate. She failed miserably as a presidential candidate, never got a single vote from anybody, dropped out early. But then Joe is so committed to choosing a black woman, that was locked in. Had to be a black woman. It just had to be. Nobody else was going to get a hearing. And of all the qualified black women, for some godforsaken reason, he chooses her. And then she's a lousy vice president. Now, there's nothing necessarily wrong with Kamala Harris. There's just nothing special about her. She, you could compare her to any one of 100 different politicians, or 1,000. But there's nothing special about her. And she was never any damn good at it. Her political philosophy is just wrong. She's so frustratingly centrist and capitalist. She's completely out of step with the times. Her political instincts are terrible. She tried to come up with policy positions, these gimmicks, these rebates and financial and tax breaks for particular corporations in particular industries, and no tax on tips after the Orange Menace already floated that one. Her position on Gaza, my God, disastrous, immoral. Cozying up to Liz Cheney and thinking that would help. And her performance, even worse. The right wing, the repugnants, they mocked her about her word salads. They were word salads. They were ridiculous. She was so careful, so inauthentic all the time that half the time she didn't make any damn sense. We're not supposed to mock her about her laugh. Her laugh was obnoxious, and she used it when she was uncomfortable. That was her crutch. She didn't know what to say, so she just laughed in this really weird, cringy, uncomfortable cackle. She didn't go on the podcast, and when she did, she sucked at it. She can't be her real self. The big moment on The View when she said, "Oh, well, I wouldn't, nothing comes to mind. I would have done anything different than Joe Biden." As a politician, she's bad at her job. She shouldn't be anywhere near the Oval Office, for the love of God. No. So this book tour / comeback is just a disaster. Do not let it happen. And this, this book where it's all very self-serving and blaming everybody else. And come on, you guys. Now, again, she's no worse than most politicians. Do I blame her for the way she thinks and maybe that she wants to run again? No. I'm telling you as a voter, don't let it happen. I'm not necessarily blaming her. She just is who she is. I might be just as stubborn. I might be just as self-serving if I wrote my book. But you see, I'm not running for president. As the great Jesse Jackson says, I'm a tree shaker, not a jelly maker. If she wants to serve the nation, fine. Kamala Harris, if you want to serve the nation, go ahead and serve. But, find a way to do it where you're somewhere behind the scenes and you're not talking and you're not leading. 1,000 other people can do it better. 1,000,000 other people could do it better. Kamala Harris just needs to shut all the way up. All right. That's it for today. Keep the pressure up. Find your organizations. Find your events. Bring it into your personal life. If you're in a job that serves the regime, get your escape plan going. Find your people. Find your support network. Boycott everything all the time. Stay in the fight. This and all other episodes on your favorite podcast platform or on the website, charlesburcell.com. Find me on Substack and Blue Sky. Thanks to our flagship terrestrial station, River West Radio in Milwaukee. Peter Donalds wrote and performed the theme song. All right. I love you. See you out there.